Hey, this is CJ Gant with Growing Every Day. Have you ever felt like you were in a state of hopelessness, like nothing was ever going to change? Like relationships. You ever been in a relationship with someone you love, but you just seem to be in this relentless cycle of hopelessness? You're trying everything you know how to try, but nothing seems to change. Frustration. Or you have a relationship with a child of yours and you're trying to get through to the child and trying to help your son or your daughter, but it just seems to be a fruitless expedition, and hopelessness sets in, and you think that that child will never become all that God intends for him or her to be. Have you ever been in what seems like a hopeless situation with a sibling where you guys just have trouble connecting, and they seem to irritate you all the time, and you've tried to make the relationship work, but it just doesn't seem like it's ever going to? Have you ever been in a situation that feels hopeless at your job, where you just don't seem to get an opportunity to show what you can do and to move upward in your job? Hopelessness, frustration. I've been there, I know. Well, this was the state for the children of Israel. A relentless cycle of what had to seem like hopelessness. A relentless cycle of sin and sacrifice, sin and a pigeon dove, sin and a turtle dove rather, sin and a pigeon, sin and a ram, sin and a goat, sin and a sheep, sin and the blood of a sheep. Always wondering, the frustration had to be always wondering if my sacrifice was good enough to cover for my sin. Always having to wonder if I had confessed my sins fully and completely enough and had sacrificed enough so that I would live the afterlife with my heavenly Father. Seemed like a cycle that would never end. But then one day, the shepherds were minding their own business in the fields, and the angels of heaven burst forth and said, "But hope is here." Then one day to the Magi at the far east, it was said to them, "Hope is here. Go see." Jesus had burst on the scene, and all of a sudden there was hope where there was before hopelessness, as this child God came on the scene. Everything changed for the children of Israel. They no longer had to wonder as they watched this wonder come into being, who showed them how to live and then eventually would take their sins away, so that they no longer had to worry, no longer had to be frustrated, no longer had to feel hopeless. They now could at any time have an audience with God. They now actually had God in them. And so it is with us today. Because of Jesus, we now have God in us, which makes nothing hopeless. In Romans chapter 15, Paul calls God the God of all hope. You might say, well, how can there be all hope, though? How can there be no hopelessness? Because we have a couple of issues. We have free will and we have circumstances. These are things we can't control. There's always the free will of the other person. You could try as hard as you want to get along with that sibling or to help that child, but if they don't want to be helped, if they don't want to have the relationship, it can seem hopeless anyhow. We don't have control of our external circumstances, so we can try all we want and the external circumstance may never change. But this is where the God of all hope comes into play. Because no matter what happens externally, the God of all hope can change things internally, and that, my friend, changes everything. I want to say that again. No matter how hopeless things may seem externally, the God of all hope can change things internally, and that changes everything. It changes how I see life. It changes how I see relationships. It changes how I see myself. It changes how I relate to the outside world. That gives me hope if my external circumstances never change. That's why I have joy this Christmas. That's why we celebrate the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. That's why we celebrate the God of all hope who sent us hope in Jesus Christ. Never a hopeless day, for I know the one who makes all things new in me if nothing externally ever changes. So we celebrate this day. We celebrate the coming of the Holy One. We celebrate the coming of one who gives us all hope in spite of what we may see. Merry Christmas. Have a great day. Love you guys. Celebrate Jesus, the God of all hope.